He is Albert Breer, senior writer, Sports Illustrated, the MMQB. His latest column is up on SI.com right now. Albert joins me here on the show. So where do you stand on that? Right now, Albert, around midseason, best team in the NFL is who?
The New Orleans Saints. I just think they're the most complete team, and I think that's been on display playing without Drew Brees. And really, you could talk philosophically about how they've been able to survive this whole thing. It's really simple. I mean, they've drafted incredibly well. It's been lights out the last 4 years. And you look at the players they put on that roster, from Mike Thomas to Sheldon Rankins to Marshawn Lattimore to Ryan Ramczyk to Alvin Kamara. I mean, it's year after year after year. There have been impact players going on that roster, and all of them on rookie deals, and it's given them flexibility. And, I'll tell you who the unsung hero is the ex-Dolphins GM, Jeff Ireland, who runs their drafts there. They've just put a fantastic team together, and a team that no longer needs, the quarterback to throw for 300 yards every week to win. And so, I think in a certain way, this has played out perfect for them because it's sort of forced them to win different ways, which they're capable of, and, it's allowed them to get Drew Brees kind of a natural break in the middle of the NFL calendar, which, if you talked to people last year, I think there's definitely a feeling out there that he wore down in December and January. And so they're going to get a fresh Drew Brees going into the second half of the season, and I think as well-rounded a team as they've ever had around him.
Would you have said that on Friday before the Patriots' defense was carved up by Lamar Jackson?
No. I'll be honest about it. I don't think – I mean, I'm not out on the Patriots. I still think they're the favorite to win the AFC. They've been leaning on a defense that's generational, and it seemed like it was generational. And, that bought them time to sort of work out the kinks offensively. I think the Patriots will be fine. I think there's a lot of stuff that they dealt with last night that they're not going to have to deal with again because of all the different elements the Ravens bring to the table. I mean, really, it's like a college team going to play against Army or Navy, So there's a lot of stuff that's not going to be applicable that the Patriots defense was faced with last night. That said, you look at the first half of their schedule, and there wasn't a lot of heavy lifting. And so I think the next 4 games are going to tell us a lot about it. They play the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Texans, and they will.
I think we got Albert Breer.
They are.
Oh, go ahead. Continue, Albert.
I think one of the big questions, too, Chris, is like how stage of the defense, too. They've got 8 starters for 29 or older by NFL standards. And so I think that's the other piece of this is, how are they going to hold up over time? It's really helped, and that I think it's unlocked Bill Belichick as a coach because they're so smart and versatile and can do so many different things. I'll be interested to see what it looks like after they get through this stretch over the next month where the schedule is a lot tougher.
So Jackson was great yesterday and, put on kind of an MVP type performance statement game. You wrote that Russell Wilson is your MVP right now. Why?
Because I think the definition of what the MVP is to me is somebody who's elevating everyone around him. And, I really think Russell's at the stage of his career now where Brady was when he was 29 or 30. And you'll remember this because as you're up there in Boston like I am, there was a point where Brady was seen as a game manager. Early in his career when he won the 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, there was really a question of whether he was going to become more than that. And then there was turnover at the skill position. Some of the older guys in those great teams went out the door, and we saw Brady was capable of carrying a team. And I think that's what we're seeing with Russell Wilson now, that he's capable of elevating the play of the people around him. And it just struck me yesterday seeing, who he was throwing to. It's guys who weren't on the roster last year. DK Metcalf, a rookie out of Ole Miss. It's Jacob Hollister, a guy they traded for almost nothing a couple days after the draft. And so, what I'm seeing from Russell right now is, a player that doesn't have the great defense he once had and is making it work with skill players that are new, and so to me, I think Lamar's been great. You can't just read into the statistics with Lamar. The way he affects the defense at every level is pretty incredible. But, I see Russell sort of going into this phase of his career where he's really capable of carrying the people around him. And I thought that was really on display yesterday where, he goes against that Buccaneers team and things weren't perfect, but he won that game twice. He won that game in regulation. They missed the field goal. He comes back in overtime. They win it again. and primarily with players that weren't on the roster a year ago.
Talking to Albert Breer, senior reporter, writer, Sports Illustrated, the MMQB. His latest column up on SI.com right now. Browns fall to 2-6 after a loss to the Broncos yesterday. They were 2-5-1 this time last year, and Hugh Jackson was on the way out. What did we miss, Albert, with Cleveland? Why have this as a team with so much hype look so bad early on?
Well, I think that, if you talk to people in the organization over the summer, they were nervous about it. And I think they sort of were what San Francisco was a year ago, where like the Niners people had told you, we've got some good players here, but we don't have the depth and there are still holes in the roster. And that's where Cleveland was, I think, coming into this year. It's easy to forget John Dorsey's only been there for a year and a half. And so, he's really only gone through 2 draft cycles, 2 free agent cycles. And, there was a lot to fix in Cleveland. And, so I think that, it was easy with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and David Njoku and Nick Chubb on the roster. It's very easy to overlook how big an issue the offensive line was. They had 4 Pro Bowl level players leave that position group over the last 4 years. Now it's Matt, Mitchell Schwartz, Kevin Zeitler, and Joe Thomas. And so, the offensive line was a huge issue, and that's an easy thing to look at. And then there are depth issues elsewhere, and that always comes into play in the NFL where you have a couple injuries. Now, all of a sudden, a position that was okay isn't okay anymore. And so I think that's a big part of it. And, the other piece, of course, is, where they've been from a discipline standpoint, which I think was going to be a question based on the big personalities in the locker room. Like, how is that mix going to come together? And certainly it hasn't come together the way that they had hoped. And I think one of the things that, one of the issues with it is, Dorsey sort of built the team in Kansas City the same way he has the team in Cleveland. The difference is in Kansas City, he was handing that roster over to a coach who has 2 decades of NFL experience as a head coach. In Cleveland, he's, giving the roster to a guy who is, in his first go-around. And so I think that's made it more challenging, and obviously discipline issues there, but there are problems with the roster too.
If you were a gambling man, is Lincoln Riley the head coach of the Browns this time next year?
I don't, and look, I think every team is going to take its swing at Lincoln Riley. Every team that has an opening is at least going to make that phone call. My feeling right now is Lincoln Riley is not going to go to a place that isn't perfect. And I think the one that would just entice him, and it's just because of where he's from, the history of the franchise, is the Cowboys. If Jerry Jones called, I think Lincoln Riley would listen. Outside of that, right now, I don't know that he would view the Cleveland job, as much as he loves Baker Mayfield, as a better situation than he has at Oklahoma. And so I don't think Lincoln Riley's in a mind to leave Oklahoma right now. I think the one that he would listen to would be Dallas. But, in the end, I think he probably views the job that he has right now as better than a lot of NFL jobs.
Yeah, the Cowboys tonight are kind of in must-win territory, Albert, it feels like. I mean, after this game, they've got Minnesota, they're at Detroit, they're at New England. I mean, this is a big moment for Jason Garrett tonight.
No question. And it's like you said, the last sort of like game where it's like, okay, they should win this one, I think, until the end of the year. Like in week 17, they play the Redskins. That's the next one that you'd really consider like a layup. And so, yeah, it's a huge moment. And it's no one's shying away from the fact there that Jason Garrett's job is on the line. He's in a contract year. It's very uncommon that NFL coaches go into get sent into contract years. Usually teams make a decision whether to extend them or fire them before that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of pressure on Jason Garrett going into tonight's game at the Meadowlands. And, it's pressure on everybody in the organization. Can you follow up what you did in Philadelphia? Can you get it rolling with, a gauntlet of a schedule ahead? No question about it. Big game for the Cowboys tonight.
Talking to Albert Breer, the MMQB.com Sports Illustrated, joining us here, Rich Eisen Show. Before I let you go, Albert, Dolphins beat the Jets yesterday in the game that the There But for the Grace of God Go I Club is the only one watching at this point. Adam Gase was asked after the game, an interesting question. A New York Daily News reporter asked Adam Gase. Listen to this.
Is this embarrassing?
I mean, it's the NFL, man. It's the NFL. You can't be embarrassed by that.
Does this win validate Stephen Ross's decision to fire you?
I'm not going to answer that. It's ridiculous.
What do you make of that question? Does this win validate Stephen Ross's decision to fire you?
Well, I make of that question that's Manish, right?
Yeah.
So, I love Manish. I'm saying that joking, but yeah, look, it's part of coaching in New York. And I know in the sports, in the NBA, same thing. It's just a different deal when you're there. And look, that whole thing has gotten so toxic now. It's hard to see where the Jets are going to be able to run it back for another year with the same sort of makeup there, And I think you have to be concerned now about your young players, guys like Sam Darnold, Jamal Adams. How do they react being in that sort of environment? I know other teams have their radar up that Jamal Adams could wind up becoming the Jalen Ramsey of 2020, where he forces his way out of town. How do you get better infrastructure out of Sam Darnold, and can you do it with Adam Gase as the head coach? These are all questions the Jets are going to have to answer. One thing that a lot of people aren't paying attention to, that they should be, is that Woody Johnson is probably coming back from the UK in 2020, which adds a whole another wrinkle into this whole thing. And so they haven't been stable. They haven't been stable there in a long time, Chris. And based on the logistics and based on the way things are set up right now and the way things could kind of play out over the course of the next 12 months, it's hard to see them finding stability without some sort of major change coming, whether it's before or after Woody gets back from the UK.
Real quick, there were reports that the Seahawks did their due diligence on Antonio Brown before claiming Josh Gordon. Does Antonio Brown find a home on an NFL roster before the end of the year?
I think the NFL is trying to prevent that by slow playing the whole investigation, which my sense is that's why they've made the decision to wait on actually talking to him about everything that went on. I just don't think the NFL wants to deal with everything that's going to come along with bringing him back into the league in 2019. And so he's out there. Somebody wants to sign him, that's fine. But I think if you're signing him, you're doing it under, the sort of assumption that he could wind up on the commissioner's exempt list, which is a non-starter for a lot of teams, because if you're bringing him in, you're going to bring him in knowing you're going to take a massive PR hit, and you're going to deal with a little bit of a circus that's going to come along with it. And if there's no guarantee he's actually going to be able to play for you in 2019, there's no sense in doing it.
Albert, appreciate the time, my friend. We'll catch up with you soon.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live, or download The Rich Eisen Show app.